Hey guys, how's it going? Let's talk about WWE attempting to stop Matt Cardona from appearing with the original ECW World Television title belt. For those that are unaware, Matt Cardona, formerly known as Zack Ryder in the WWE, recently defeated Rhino, the Impact Wrestling superstar formerly known from WWE and ECW fame, in a match for the original ECW World Television Championship belt. Matt Cardona was able to win the belt, and Matt Cardona, pictured here in Game Changer Wrestling, go check it out, guys. It's a very good independent wrestling promotion, was told by WWE to return the championship belt. And I discussed this here at length with a very special guest in the holiday, Christopher Mace, returning to YouTube. We also discussed the original ECW World Heavyweight Championship not being used by WWE, but that is an incorrect statement. They did actually, as Rob Van Dam, you see is pictured there, bring back a WWE made version replica of the original ECW World Heavyweight title belt. So I'm wrong about that. But we have got a lot to say here, guys, and I hope you enjoy this. I'll be back at the end. We were speaking earlier off the recording about Matt Cardona. Do you want to just run me through what's the issue with Matt Cardona and the ECW original television championship?
Well, the issue is what it is pretty much is that WWE believes they have ownership of the ECW World TV Championship because when they bought the intellectual property at ECW, that included all championships. However, we all know that Rhino never returned neither the original ECW World Heavyweight Championship nor the ECW World TV Championship because that was his choice. He did never return both those belts. So, therefore, he still had possession of both, not only the ECW World title, but the ECW World TV Championship that WWE never used in the first place when they acquired ECW.
I mean, I have to say this as well, because let's be fair, in 2022, this is nothing to do with ECW, by the way, guys. This is to do with Matt Cardona, and Matt Cardona once again picking up steam in the independent wrestling scene and picking up steam on social media and becoming a better character than WWE would allow him to be. Like, let's be fair, this Matt Cardona would be a certified star in WWE right now, but they won't have it. He's the type of character that has gone against what they want their characters to be. They know they screwed Zack Ryder up. They know they did that. Yeah, and they know that no matter what, fans will always get behind him because of that fact. But this ECW championship thing, like you just referred to there, Holiday, they own the intellectual property of these belts. Why on earth did they bring back that monstrosity, or did they design that monstrosity of an ECW World Heavyweight Championship in 2006? That belt was embarrassing. Did anyone remember that? That silver horrible belt that they had for ECW, the ECW brand, why it was part of WWE. When, if you really cared about those belts, and let's be perfectly honest, you should have been more concerned in 2005 or 6 when Rhino was burning your championship belt, the ECW championship belt, on TNA television, which was much closer than anything that Matt Cardona is involved in now to WWE. You know what I mean? Like, this is nothing to do with ECW. This is to do with Matt Cardona and WWE, I think. I personally think that if WWE ever cared about that championship belt, they would have had that championship belt returned to them. And I'm almost certain that Rhino at some stage attempted to return these championship belts to WWE. And WWE probably laughed and said, well, what do we want them with? What do we want them for? You know, in 2000 and maybe 2, 2000 and maybe 3, when Rhino first showed up in WWE, as a goodwill gesture, he probably would have tried to give those championship belts back. Why would he have kept them for? And I'm almost certain that he was told by somebody, maybe Paul Heyman or somebody who worked there at the time, well, they don't want those belts. And, you know, 3 years later, it proved it by WWE bringing back ECW. And like I say, no one can remember. Just go online now and look up WWE's version of the ECW Championship. It looked more like the Divas Championship than the WWE Championship. Honestly, I'm not even joking. One of the biggest things that turned me off the ECW brand was when I first seen their championship belt. I was like, what's this? This belt was worse than anything that I've seen in wrestling. You know, bearing in mind that even the lower companies had gold belts at that time there.
And it also could have been, though, too, Rhino was part of the company when he Well, when ECW closed, he went to WWE and he won the Hardcore Championship, won the U.S. title. They never brought him up as the ECW World Champion nor the ECW World TV Champion. Never brought that up. And they had him. They actually fired him. If everybody remembers, they fired him in 2005 during WrestleMania for a domestic dispute with his wife at the time. And then he went and he came back for ECW One Night Stand. And he had that match with returning Sabu. And he had that match, but they never referenced him as the ECW World Champion nor the ECW World TV Champion. So if WWE had any interest in these belts, they would have asked for these belts back 100 times over if they really wanted to bring these championship back. And by the time they actually relaunched the brand for ECW in 2006 after a second One Night Stand, Rhino was already in TNA Impact, and he could have asked for him to they could have tried to buy the belt back from him or try to negotiate a deal to get the belt back, and they never did.
That segment was aired on national television. That segment that where Rhino threw the belt in the ECW belt into the bin. I mean, obviously, I think they did a bait and switch. I don't think he actually threw the actual physical title belt into the bin. Yeah,
he did. He said he didn't.
Did he? What? He actually threw the actual physical title belt in the burning bin.
No, he said he didn't. He said he didn't throw the actual belt.
Yeah,
he said
I read that he said they did a bait and switch like a Canberra cut where he put it into a bag and then he threw it into the bin. Yeah.
So what he said. Yeah.
And let's be honest, if they cared anything about anything to do with ECW in 2005 and 6, that's when they should have asked for those physical championship belts to be brought back, especially when if Rhino was going to be appearing on Impact with those belts, when they were planning on, even if they probably weren't planning on reviving ECW then, they'd already done the ECW first One Night Stand show by that time there. So, and I'm sure they'd done that show by then. So if you think about it, in fact, I might be right in saying, I could be wrong, I'm sure Rhino's response was because WWE didn't book him on the ECW One Night show. I'm almost certain that Rhino went off with that segment because WWE had never asked him to come back for the ECW show, and he was still the ECW heavyweight champion. I'm almost certain that that's why he went off on TNA Impact. I could be wrong, and I'll encourage anyone to go back and watch that segment there. And then this also leads me to my next question. So what on earth happened to the ECW Tag Team Champions then? The belts, the World Tag Team Championship belt. What happened to those? Have they ever been located or have they ever been seen? Who was the final ECW Tag Team Champions? This is something that I'd be curious to find out about. You know what I mean? Because now you think, well, we know
and Roadkill were the last tag team champions. I may be mistaken. I think they were the last tag champions.
Who was that? Danny Doring and Roadkill?
I think they were the last tag team champions. And even then, you've heard the stories that we're trying to bring Roadkill into
WWE's got them belts then, because those guys went to WWE after WWE. I don't think they ever appeared on WWE TV, but most of those guys went to WWE, and then obviously WWE was like, no, you're not going to work here or whatever. So I won't be surprised if WWE didn't have the possession of the actual physical belts.
Well, you remember they had the story about Roadkill. They had them, and I think in Ohio Valley Wrestling, they were trying to train them up. They wanted to be a potential opponent for The Undertaker at WrestleMania.
Yeah, I know they definitely. I know that. In fact, I'm almost certain that everyone from ECW was signed to WWE contracts, because they were already all signed. Because obviously ECW wasn't like WCW with the guaranteed money and all that.
I think Shane Douglas and Francine weren't signed.
Well, remember, they weren't going to get signed anyway because obviously who they were, and what obviously their problems with WWE as well. But if you think about it, WCW had the Time Warner contracts that weren't WCW contracts. That's the difference, right? Where they sat out their contracts, whereas with ECW, WWE would have been able to just acquire the whole company, rosters and everything. Right. So most of those guys, and I could be completely wrong when I speak about that, but I'm almost certain that Rhino went off in that segment because they didn't ask him to come back for the first One Night Stand show. Because he had or it might have been to resurrect ECW, because I remember him saying, how can you bring back ECW when I'm the ECW champion? And you know what? He might not have a claim to being the ECW champion, but he's certainly got a claim to being still the current or if he lost it to Matt Cardona, of course, he still had a claim to being the current ECW World Heavyweight Champion, World Television Champion. Because let's be perfectly honest, no wrestling company is ever truly dead, is it? And you know, let's be honest, when wrestling companies shut their doors, their final champion, or when they take away the championship belts, that they make them defunct, the final champion is always counted as the champion, you know, forever and a day. Like, you know, that belt basically retired with that champion. He will always be now, you know, the European champion or whatever, no matter how WWE plays it. Unless they bring back that belt, the last champion will always be the champion. And if you want to officially bring back the championship, which is the reason why they probably won't ever bring back the European Championship, they would have to acknowledge that the person who previously had the championship was, you know, the longest reigning champion potentially in the history of wrestling. Because let's be honest, if you were to bring back the European Championship today, the last champion was what, 2003? 2000, when they bought the United States Championship.
It was when RVD versus Jeff Hardy in a ladder match to unify the IC and European Championship.
So yeah, to just end this segment here, what do you Holiday think about all this? Like, who do you think really is the legal? I mean, legally it's WWE, obviously, but who do you think is the rightful person who should own possession of the physical ECW? Because WWE owns the name to the ECW World Television Champion. Let's be perfectly honest, because they own the copyright to ECW. But Matt Cardona could easily just say, this is the ECW Championship, the Evolution Television Championship, Evolution Championship Wrestling, just create his own wrestling organization, and then there you have the ECW. Nothing says that the name ECW, because you can still build a company called ECW, you just can't promote it as the ECW, because WWE obviously owns Extreme Championship Wrestling. But you could stylize a company as ECW if you wanted to, because other companies have been built with different names like WCW and WWA and stuff. But yeah, to ask you the question, who do you think is the rightful, should be the rightful person who should have possession of the belt? Should it be Rhino or should it be the WWE?
I think it's Rhino at this point, because they never asked for the belts back, or if they did, that we don't know about. And Rhino could have easily turned the deal down if they said, hey, we're going to give you X amount of money for these championships, and he could have said no. Because you got to remember the timeline. He was in WWE from 01 to 05. They never asked for the belt. He got fired during the WrestleMania in 05, the WrestleMania weekend, because of a domestic dispute with his wife at the time. He did come back for the ECW One Night Stand 2005 while he was signed with TNA. And people might not forget that he was signed with TNA when he did the appearance at One Night Stand when he fought Sam.
So I assume that it must have been the second One Night Stand then, where they didn't invite him back or anything like that, because he obviously would have been in TNA at the time. But I'm almost certain that
the story I understood was TNA wouldn't allow him to go for the second one. Same thing with Raven. Raven wanted to go do the second one, and TNA wouldn't allow Raven to go do the second one.
Well, then maybe I'm wrong then, but I do remember him going insane in that promo about something to do with ECW and him being the ECW champion. Yeah, I remember. But then I could be wrong about the whole context of it. But that's what comes to memory when I think about it. But it just goes to show, because like let's be fair, WWE has made this mistake before, but it's been vital before. Yeah, where look at the Alundra Blaze situation. They cared so little about their women's championship that they allowed a woman to be released from their company that then threw their championship belt in a trash can on their closest or their biggest rivals television show. Do you know what I mean? So you got to understand that WWE has made this mistake before. Like, I don't think that they're bothered about the physical belt being shown on television. I think they're bothered about Matt Cardona defending the actual belt and declaring himself as the ECW television champion. That might be the issue. Although if it's WWE, they probably won't care if he was promoting himself as the champion, or if he was defending the belt, or if he just was seen on TV with the belt. Because if they did it with Taz with the FGW Championship, as you said, they would definitely do it with this belt. And do you want to just give a little bit of a synopsis of what happened with the Taz FTW belt? Because they did the same thing then, didn't they?
Yeah, they tried to say that the FGW Championship was part of their branding of ECW because since they own the rights to the footage of ECW, this ain't Seinfeld, where Taz introduced the FGW Championship. They tried to say that the FGW Championship belongs to WWE, which is not the case. That was a belt that was created by Taz, used for that angle, and was not ever recognized as an official championship. It was only used for a storyline while Shane Douglas was out with an injury, even though Taz did lose the belt to Sabu deliberately and then regained the belt back from Sabu in a title for title match when he became ECW champion. That's what mainly the story about and what the belt was for. So Taz owned the intellectual property for the FGW Championship because he was the one who had the belt created in the first place for storyline purposes. Why Shane Douglas was out with several injuries as the ECW World Champion.
So, because obviously I remember as well, there was the debacle years ago with Matt Cardona, wasn't there, where he was the internet champion and WWE didn't they purchase the rights to that belt off Matt Cardona? And then something like that. Am I wrong about that? What happened does anyone remember what happened with that? Like, where Matt Cardona, when he was Zack Ryder, when he first got released, he went on the independent scene then, didn't he? And he was promoting himself as the internet champion or whatever it was, which was basically just like a toy version of the Intercontinental Championship. I'm sure it was, or something like that. And then he designed his own belt. And because he got really popular on social media, when he came back to WWE and he had that run where they buried him with Kane and Eve Torres thing, or Eve Torres. Is that her name? Eva Torres? Yeah. When they buried him with that store, he was I'm sure WWE purchased or they made him sign an agreement that he wouldn't now like portray himself as the internet champion, something like that. So WWE's got a bit of a history with trying to control the narrative when it comes to these fictional, made up within television wrestling title belts. I'm surprised that they didn't step in there and try to stop TNA from doing the Legends Championship belt because it was given to Booker T at the time. We could say, oh yeah, you're giving one of our ex-wrestlers a Legends Championship. He's not a legend in your promotion. We own that championship belt. I mean, come on, man. WWE's practices are dubious at best. And to try to bully this wrestler from, having a belt where, yes, technically deep down, if WWE wanted to get Jerry McDevitt, I'm surprised they haven't. Maybe the reason why Matt Cardona did actually throw the belt into the trash was because WWE did actually send a cease and desist thing to him, because I personally not seen him with that belt. I've only just started watching things like Game Changer Wrestling. So I haven't personally seen Matt Cardona with that championship belt, and I know that he's a heel at the moment. So it would.
Yeah, well, he's actually lost the belt. He had the Internet Championship. It was his belt. He owned the rights to that belt when he left WWE. He owned the rights to that belt, and he went and defended it on GCW TV. He was using it in storyline to get a shot at the GCW World Championship that he defeated Dick Eppin Cage for and won that championship. And then he lost that championship to Moxley. And this was right after he lost the Internet Championship to FA. In the match, he regained his Internet Championship back from FA when Chelsea Green debuted for GCW. This is the same event that Thunder Rosa and other people debuted for GCW. And he was able to get the Internet Championship back, and he's going on a tour. He's making a name for himself. He's won the digital championship from.
I assume that it was just WWE were just, when he was in WWE, they were just making him so that he wasn't allowed to promote that championship belt. That's what.
Oh, they didn't want that title on TV. No, they didn't want that Internet Championship on TV. That was for his YouTube channel.
What was it called? Was it Z Long Island Story or whatever it was called? I remember him having that internet. He was one of the very first wrestlers to really hit big on YouTube. Yeah,
the Long Island Ice Tea.
Yeah, the Z as in Z for Zach. Z Long Island Iced Tea. Yeah, he did that and he got himself over. But like I said, he wasn't even. I think the actual belt was being defended with wrestling figures. I might be wrong about that, but I'm sure that the actual belt was being wrestled by him on camera with the wrestling figures. I don't think he was actually going out and wrestling at the time. Or maybe he was, I can't remember. But I know that when he came back to WWE, they basically forced him to stop referencing anything to do with him being the internet champion or anything like that. And stuff like, and like I say, if I'm not wrong, they gave him the United States Championship or whatever when he won it at WrestleMania, that shock win, when he won it in the ladder match at WrestleMania. They gave him that win to completely suppress fans from referring to him as like this underdog champion character, etc.
Well, he won the IC belt at WrestleMania 32, when everybody was, and that was when every single person seemed like they were out. All the big stars were out with injuries.
I mean, yeah, so like I said, it comes down to that, and I think we can both agree, or all agree. The fact is WWE, they're very spiteful when it comes to anything that they didn't create, but they own. As in, like, they know they didn't create ECW, and they know they didn't have anything to do with that. But at the same time, they would still. It's petty, isn't it? Let's be honest. Before we even get into anything, it is very, very petty what WWE have done with that. Like you say, they didn't care about that championship belt. If they ever cared about any of those title belts, they would have asked for them back. Because I'm going to be perfectly honest, and I'm going to say this once again, the state of the championship belts that they bought for ECW, or the ECW championship belt, the fact that they never had tag team champions in ECW or a television championship in ECW goes to show they never cared about any of that. The belts that they've designed since the ECW belt have been questionable at best, apart from maybe, you know, your current United States Championship belt. The Intercontinental belt isn't too bad now. I look at it now a few years down the line. But let's be perfectly honest, guys. There was a period of time where when you look at those physical ECW television and world championship belts, go on the internet now. Anyone listening, go on the internet now and look at those belts. Search those belts out and tell me that they are not 100 times better than 90% of the belts that are in WWE right now. Why would that company not have asked for those belts and displayed those belts on display? Like, look at these wonderful ECW. And bearing in mind that the ECW World Tag Team Championships, and I'm only just remembering this now, they actually are mimics, and like they are based on the WWF Intercontinental Championship belt, the original IC belt, or the Ultimate Warrior belt is the one that I remember. If you look closely at the ECW World Tag Team Championship belts, I noticed it years ago when the Eliminators were the tag team champions. Maybe not the final belts, but the belts that were prevalent when ECW were at the top of, you know, like the third biggest promotion, and they were on pay-per-view and all that. Their physical belts were two versions of the WWF Intercontinental Championship belt. Look it up. And they're also I'm sure their television championship as well didn't it have some kind of look like another belt as well? The belts look like other belts. It either looked like a WCW Tag Team Championship belt, or it looked like a WCW belt. All the belts look like each other, if I remember rightly. So the ECW belts, they were based on different belts. If you look closely at them, they were based on different belts. They just had a different design and a different style when you look at them. But I know for a fact that the ECW Tag Team title belts were beautiful titles. They were two versions of the Intercontinental Championship. And that may be why WWF or WWE asked for those belts back, but they never asked for the other belts back. But we don't know. We don't know where the Tag Team Championships are. Maybe Roadkill and, you know, I don't know if he's still alive or not. Maybe Roadkill and Danny Doring will make returns to wrestling, and they'll show up with the ECW Tag Team Championship belt. Because it makes me laugh now. Now I'm actually even talking about this now with you, Holiday. It makes me laugh to even think. So you've got 4 championship belts that you never asked for, but the other belt, the Taz belt, that wasn't ECW's, you actually made inquiries about that champion. That's ridiculous, Holiday, when you think about it. What do you think about that? That they actually asked for the FGW belt, which was nothing to do with ECW apart from it being on their television, but they never asked for the world or maybe they did ask Rhino for the belts back. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? The only person you can really ask is Rhino. Unfortunately, at this stage, the Holiday Christopher Mace dropped off from the call. To end the whole saga with the ECW Television and World Championship belts, as I said at the start of the video, I did do a bit of research after, and it turns out that WWE did try to get these championship belts back from Rhino, and there was obviously some kind of issue. I have addressed all the other things that we were speculating about at the start of the video as well.
I'd like to shout out to the holiday, Christopher Mace. Hopefully we can do this again soon, and hopefully you can get back on YouTube. Please like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.